training session. So we move on to the next session. You learnt data collection. So what do you think is going to be the next session? Naturally, it is going to be data analysis, right? Whatever data you have collected, you will have to analyze it properly, interpret it properly. So sir has given you all the information about qualitative, quantitative, how important it is to analyze this data. But then madam will be talking about what kind of statistical tools we can use in order to analyze qualitative data or quantitative data. And to conduct this session, I am very happy to welcome Dr. Thiruchelvi ma'am. So she is from the Dept. of Mgmt.Studies, and ma'am has a PhD from Anna University, and she has worked on the area of emotional intelligence. Her MBA is also from here, and then she has also has some psychological testing. That is her research interest, occupational psychology, individual differences, right? So these are the research interests that ma'am has, and she has published several papers and also presented several papers in international conferences. So I hope that you are receiving diverse opinions from different areas. Like sir spoke about, he comes from a different background. So here we have another professional who is going to talk from the background of management studies. Please accept a small token of our love and appreciation from Center for Research.
Okay, on the outset, very, very sorry, because I know intruding into your lunch time is a big sin. But still, I don't have any other option rather than, doing it now. Okay, hope you're all hungry, right? Hope you all can understand Tamil. நல்ல வயிறு பசிக்கிற நேரத்தில் வந்துட்டு நான் வந்து ஸ்டாட்டிஸ்டிக்கல் டெக்னிக், டேட்டா அனாலிசிஸ், அந்த மேத்தமேட்டிக்கல் ஃபார்முலா, ஃபங்க்ஷன்ஸ் அப்படி பேசினா எவ்வளோ கொடுமையாக இருக்கும்ல? I can understand because I have also come from these kind of chairs, right? But anyway, kindly bear with me for another 40 minutes to the maximum, okay? Thing is, the last speaker, he talked about the data collection, right? So now, data is all about numbers, okay? Or else sometimes even, non-metric data are also available. You can have words, sentences, phrases, anything you can take into the purview of data. But majority of my talk would be related to the metric data rather than the non-metric data. This session I have placed in such a way that whatever I address pertains to the metric data. That is, metric data is all about numbers. What we can really do with numbers. Say for example, we have numbers, right? Lot of numbers everywhere. Say for example, when I start browsing, a data is being generated at the other end. When I start clicking, again another data is being generated. So whatever I do in the internet is being converted into a data at some other end. So somebody has got large amounts of data. So unless, usually we talk about how to convert the data into information. So think the other step also, how we can really convert the data into information, and then the information can be converted into insights. Because unless and until we have an insight, it is not going to be of any use to any business. So this session I'll be talking about, just because you have a data, it doesn't mean that you can just jump into analysis. Please remember that. So just because if you have numbers, it doesn't mean that with any kind of a numbers you can do any kind of an analysis. No, there are certain prerequisites before doing data analysis, what we should do with the numbers, the kind of mammoth numbers what we have got in our hands, what should we do? So I'll talk about that to the major part. And then after cleaning, transforming everything, once you consider as a real good data, then only we'll be starting with the analysis. So I'll just first talk about how you can really convert the data what you have in your hand into a clean quality data. Because it is not that after data collection it is not data analysis, after data collection it is all about data cleaning. So only a cleaned data can really go for an analysis. So I'll just talk about data cleaning at the initial step, and then I'll talk about what kind of an analysis we'll do, rather at the different part. So remember, there is a lot of information or else a lot of insights what we can derive from the information is there inside the data. So the data tries to talk with us. Unless we open and then we talk in the same language of the data, we can't understand the data. இங்கே உட்காந்துக்கோங்க, நான் சொல்லும்போது மாற்றுங்க. So as I said, I'll be talking about the data quality. One thing is I'll be talking about the missing data. Then there are certain extreme values, what we can really do with the data, and then how we can look into the distribution of the data. So these three major aspects when we talk about the data quality. So the one thing is, let us start with the missing data first. Okay. Now can anyone make out a guess? Say for example, any kind of a data pertaining to your research. Maybe your research may need a metric data or else a non-metric data. Now imagine you have got a data in your hands and there are too many missing values. What would you do? Can you guess? You will interpolate. Okay, how will you interpolate first? Okay, previous value you will. Okay, imagine. Say for example, we are collecting IQ scores of all of us. Okay, so my IQ score is missing and you have got your own IQ score. Can your IQ score be put on my head? Imagine, நம்ம எல்லார்கிட்ட இருந்து நம்ம IQ ஸ்கோரை கலெக்ட் பண்றோம், என்னோட IQ ஸ்கோர் மிஸ்ஸிங், எனக்கு வேற யாரோட IQ ஸ்கோரை கொடுக்க முடியுமா? வேற என்ன பண்ணலாம்? My behavior, from my behavior my IQ could be guessed. Okay, depends on the data trend. That's the interpolation can be made. Okay, that interpolation is one way, right? But provided you have to think about the rest of the other things too. It is not that, remember, just because our data is missing, we will never choose the action at once. We look into many other things first. So here, okay, say for example, if my IQ score is missing, from all of us we are collecting data, right? So here I'll just make out a simple example of IQ so that everyone can understand. Okay, imagine from this entire room we are collecting IQ for everyone, and imagine that my questionnaire has got some 50 questions to measure IQ. Okay, so we are all filling up a questionnaire containing 50 questions, using which the IQ of every individual is assessed. Maybe a summated score gives IQ. ஒரு 50 क्वेश्चंसக்கு நம்ம ஆன்சர் பண்றோம், 50 क्वेश्चंஸோட டோட்டல் என்னோட IQ ஸ்கோரை நான் அசைன் பண்றேன். சிம்பிள் எக்ஸாம்பிள் தான், ஓகேவா? இப்போ நம்ம எடுத்துட்டோம். இதுல இப்போ say for example இங்க நம்ம maybe approximately say for example here there are some 120 participants in the room or else 120 people in the room. So we have got a data from 120 people. Imagine there are missing. So here, say for example, if I am going to throw out every missing ones, say for example, there are some 30 questionnaires. Out of this 120, there are 30 questionnaires that has got missing values. Can I really throw all this 30 out? Imagine, out of 120, 30 is moving out. So out of 120, 30 is a big number. In case if you have lakhs and lakhs of data, then 30 is nothing. But out of 120, 30 is a big number. So if you are just like that jump into a conclusion of leaving out all the missing values or else omitting all the missing values, then in that case my entire sample size is reduced, because here this is the sample which I have got, right? So from this 120 straight away I am moving to the sample size of 90. Whatever research design I had in my mind prior starting up the data collection, I might have developed a research design, right? So my research design is for 120 people. So straight away I can't go back and change my research design. 120 க்கு தான் நான் ஒரு டிசைனை பண்ணி வச்சிருக்கிறேன். இந்த டிசைன்ல இருந்து again நான் 90 க்கு இல்ல இது பரட்ட சூரி மாதிரி கிடையாது, அழிச்சிட்டு முதல்ல இருந்து ஆடுவோம், அப்படி பண்ண முடியாது ரிசர்ச். So research has to go on, keep on going. Not you can go back again, do something again, you can't keep on go back and then returning to that place again, go back. Nothing that could happen in your research, because you have to make out your research design so clear that it would be valid at any point of time in your research. So my research design is for 120 people. Now I can't go back and then change my research design for 90. That is impossible. So, and 30 out of this 120 is a very big number. And in my research design, I haven't made any provision for this 30 also. So, usually we make provisions for missing ones. So, remember the point number 1, what I want to tell is, there will always be a missing value in your research. So, prior to starting the data collection itself, make provisions for missing data. It is not that after data collection you will be thinking about your missing data. No. Every data, whether you do with a machine, man or anything, you will have a missing data. So, prior to that, have your research design making provision for the missing data. Then I will talk about what are all the provisions we can make, right? So, here, whenever we have a missing data, we will be thinking about 4 things. One thing is, first, what is the missing data? We will be just looking into the type of the missing data. Then we think about the extent of the missing data. To what extent? Is it large or low? Whatever it is. Then we think about the randomness of the missing data. Is the missing data occurring randomly or not? Then at the last point only, we will be choosing what should be done with the missing data. So, we will see one by one all these things. So, there is something called as an ignorable missing data. Ignorable missing data means the researcher has thought about the missing data prior to the research itself. Say for example, if I collect data from people, my study is more about a behavioral research. So, I collect data from people. And I know very well that not everyone would be serious in sharing the data. And especially in the Indian context, for sharing the data, no premium is being paid. Say for example, sir collected the questionnaire, right? Sir collected data from you. Were you paid anything? You have just given the data, but you were not being paid. Or else there is no premium on your part. நீங்க அந்த டேட்டா ஃபில் பண்ணி நீங்க கொடுக்குறீங்கல்ல, இதுக்கு இன்டர்ன் நீங்க என்ன வாங்குறீங்க? இன்டர்ன் நமக்கு எதுவும் கிடைக்காது இல்லையா? So majorly in the Indian setup, this kind of a data collection is highly prevalent. You can't see all these things in the West. Because in the West, if I give data for you, what would I get in turn? Am I getting money? Am I getting credits? Or any other thing? But I should be getting something in turn. But in the Indian scenario, it is not something like that. In the Indian scenario, data is so cheap. Data has got no value at all. And in turn, nothing is being paid. So just like that, the data is being collected. That is why in the Indian scenario, if we are collecting data, we'll have a lot of missing values. Imagine if I'm not going to get anything and if I'm being asked 100 questions, எனக்கு எதுவுமே கிடைக்காது, என்கிட்ட ஒரு 100 questions-க்கு ஆன்சர் கேட்குறாங்க, நான் எப்படி ஆன்சர் பண்ணுவேன்? It will take another half an hour of my time, right? And will I be serious enough in sharing something? No. So that is why in the Indian scenario, these missing values are highly, highly prevalent. Even, say for example, even if you are working with machines, I think your majority of the people would be doing your research in the engineering background, right? So even if you are doing all your work with the machines, say for example, if you can never be an observer, you have got an observer to observe and record everything. So do you think that the observer would be as serious as you, a researcher? No. So the observer would be missing out many things. That is where this missing data. So there are certain ignorable data are there. Ignorable data means the researcher knows that. Say for example, if I am doing in a behavioral research, I know that there will be a provision of 20% of the people who won't take it seriously. So I end up in getting a 20% of a questionnaires which I have to throw it in the bin. That is not going to be of any use to me. So I know well in advance. So there are certain metrics which we can make use of, especially in the Indian scenario, especially when we are doing research with the people. 60% of the provision is being made for missing data. Imagine if you are collecting from 100 people, only 40 would be of any use. 60 would be of no use at all, especially when we are collecting data from people. Behavioral research நம்ம பண்றோம், individual கிட்ட இருந்து data வாங்குறோம் அப்படினா 100 பேர் கிட்ட வாங்குனீங்கன்னா 40 data தான் யூஸ் ஆகும். Got it? So only 40% of the data would be of any use. The 60% of the data, the researcher has already made the provision, already made the mindset that 60% of the data is going to be a waste. So if you have got everything You have made the provision, your research design is such a way that everything could be ignored. Then if at all, if some error might have happened, then say for example, especially when you are doing research in the behavioral aspects, personal bias would be there. Say for example, a simple example, if I am asking you a question, are you intelligent? Or else, do you think that your self-worth is more? Can you rate your self-esteem? If I am asking such a kind of questions, are you an extrovert? All these things, do you have a very high self-regard? If I am asking all these kind of questions to you, is there anyone in the group would be telling that, no, I don't have much self-worth at all? Usually we want to paint a fairer picture of ourselves on the eyes of others, right? So that is what human beings are. We always want to have a fairer picture of us. So there would always be a personal bias. Even this kind of a questionnaire is also a waste. Though it is not coming under the purview of the missing data, but it is a waste data. So usually we make provisions for all these things in the research design itself. And sometimes, say for example, okay, leaving out that, the individual ones, leaving out that, say for example, if I am asking you, on your face if I am asking you, how am I delivering? What would your answer be? Inside you might be thinking something, right? But at least on my face, we think about some kind of a decorum and everything, and then at least on my face you have to tell a lie. பரவாயில்ல மேம் அப்படினாவது நீங்க சொல்லி தான் ஆகணும், வேற வழி இல்லை. So sometimes we are being compelled to do certain things. So we make provisions for all these things while we are doing up your research design itself. So these are all ignorable ones. The sampling error, the personal bias. Personal bias is all about how I project myself. So all these things we make provisions. So that is what this ignorable missing data. So that is what this ignorable data is all about. So sometimes the sensor data, say for example, if I am asking, if you ask about my marital status, say for example, I might be fighting a legal battle for divorce. Especially in the Indian context, am I be open enough to tell that the case is in the court, the judgment is about to come, and I am expecting a divorce? Will I be open enough to tell that? Or else, say for example, even if I am in a live-in, will I be telling it openly I am in a live-in? No. So there are certain censored ones. There are certain sensitive things. And always remember, when you are collecting data, collect the data for your research. Because sometimes we are inquisitive. Say for example, my study might be about the stress of single mothers. There is the stress of children of single mothers. This is study title. Single mother raise பண்ற childrenக்கு என்ன மாதிரியான stress இருக்கும்? My study is all about this, right? My study is not about why I am single, why someone is single, what made that individual to become a single. No. Say for example, I collect data using an interview technique, not something like a questionnaire. Some interview technique I am using that I am collecting. I should be very careful in framing up my questions. There is nothing like intruding into my privacy. Why someone is being single? ஒருவேளை கல்யாணம் ஆகி டிவோர்ஸ் ஆயிருக்குமோ, ஒருவேளை ஹஸ்பண்ட் விட்டுட்டு போயிட்டாரோ, இல்லை நம்ம முதல்ல இருந்தே கல்யாணம் பண்ணலையோ, இது அடாப்டட் சைல்டோ, இந்த எல்லா கொஸ்டினும் யோசிச்சு பாருங்க. நீங்க ரிசர்ச் பண்ணும்போது நமக்குள்ள ஓடிட்டே இருக்கும். நம்மளோட ரிசர்ச்சுக்கும் that question has nothing to do with that. Our question is all about the children's stress. Being raised by single mother, the children's stress. But there is always an inquisitive person inside us. Everywhere we have got that inquisitivity running inside us. Because in general, we want to know about many things. And especially these kind of a sensitive things, we just want to have this kind of a data, even though it is not related to that. So these are all certain things which we should be aware of. Collect data only what is required. And especially with the sensitive data, that is where the censor things arises. So I might be censored. Say for example, sometimes even, say for example, if I am asking about your annual income of a family, even that is also a little bit of a sensitive question. Or say for example, if at all, if I am asking about your siblings, your relationship with others. So always give out the provision that people may prefer not to say anything. Always give that provision to your respondent. So those things, the censored data, you can't do anything over it because that's a sensitive data. So we'll make a provision for that. And we'll make clear that that is not any way affecting the objective of your research. So if something is not affecting the objective of your research, that could be ignorable. Or else our research design itself has made in such a way that we have made provisions for everything, then that is ignorable. If at all, if we can't ignore something, say for example, as I said, some 120 people I have collected data, 30 is missing. I can't ignore now. Now, what should I do with this? Because from this 120 people I have collected, 30 has got missing value. I can't just like that throw the 30 and then keep moving ahead with an analysis. No. So now, for this 30 missing one, what should I do? So that is what the rest of the things are all about. So that is what the non-ignorable ones are all about. So then I have to think about why this missing data. There might be some kind of a procedural flaws. Say for example, I might have asked up a question which the respondent can never understand. So when you leave the organization, do you burn the bridge? If I am asking this question. Now question answer solunga. When you leave your, say for example, for your this research, you might have left your job and then you might have come, right? So if at all, if people like you are there, then I am asking you the question, when you have left the organization, did you burn the bridge? But usually the tendency is either we leave it or else we give a neutral answer. Neutral neither yes nor no. It means or else don't agree. So in the central there is no question at all. So there might be a procedural flaw because people may not understand certain things. And I might have asked such a kind of a thing which people can never understand. Or else they have to go and turn out all the dictionaries and all to find out the meaning. Why should they do that? So missing data will give a hint that there are procedural flaws in my data collection method. Or else say for example, even if I do a kind of an observation, there are certain things that might be missing. It means that that could never be observed. So the procedural flaws, the missing data will give a big hint about the flaws in our research design. So that is what this procedural flaws are all about. Then there are certain things like, say for example, we have collected data from this 120 people, right? There are 30 missing. Now initially what I do is, I'll check my questionnaire. Is it all understood by everyone? So can really people answer, within this given time can answer, all these things and all I check. Now everything is okay. Now I am convinced that the questionnaire is okay. But still there are 30 people who haven't answered. Now I check for, is there any kind of a pattern, is it missing? Is that the last rows haven't answered everything? So on the last rows la irukra 30 mattum answer pannaliya? Is it that the front rows has not answered? Or else is it that the females haven't answered? Is it that the males haven't answered? Is it that the people who are very young haven't answered? I check for the pattern. From the pattern only we are just going to make out a lot. Because is it that the missing data is occurring at random or not? If it is occurring at random, then no problem at all. If it is not occurring at random, say for example, the last row hasn't answered, or else people under 30, they haven't answered. Enoda 30 missing data ume 30 years ku keela irukravanga kitta irundha miss agudhu. Appadina enoda question irukum and 30 years of age ku edho oru prachana irukku. Because that is a kind of a pattern, right? Even though you are sitting, mixedly you are sitting, but from my questionnaire I understood that people under 30 years of age, they have slipped certain questions. So it means that there is something that is related to the age of the respondent on my questionnaire. Then again it is a big headache on the researcher's head. The researcher has to think a lot. Why such a kind of a pattern really occurs? First you have to find out the pattern. That itself is a difficult job. Even after finding out the pattern, say for example, as I said, 30 years of age, these are all some guesses, right? To talk it is easy. But when I have my data, it is pretty difficult to find out the patterns and all, because you have to look from, not only from your variable perspective, but from the different perspectives. Because your age is another variable. I am not concerned about your age. I am concerned only about your IQ levels. But your age is another variable which I have to think about. Your gender is another variable which I have to think about. Your seating position is another variable, again, which I have to think about. So I have to think about many things if this kind of a randomness comes. If you find that there is no randomness in the missing data, remember that that is where a researcher enters into trouble. எங்கேயோ பேட்டர்ன்ல தான் இருக்கு, ரேண்டம் இல்லை அப்படின்னு உங்களுக்கு ப்ரூவ் ஆயிருச்சு அப்படின்னா உங்களுக்கு ஹெடேக் ஸ்டார்ட் ஆயிருச்சுன்னு அர்த்தம். Because you have to find out the pattern. That is the biggest challenge a researcher would be facing. So that is why majority of the time, what from the research perspective, நானும் அங்க உட்காரும்போது நானும் என்ன பண்ணுவேன் அப்படின்னா, whatever the missing data is there, I'll just throw it out. Because if it turns out to be this kind of a pattern, then again it is a big headache, right? We have to find out the reason for it. Then again we have to find out the solution for it. So usually உங்களோட மைண்ட் செட்ல இருந்து எப்படி நம்ம பார்ப்போம் அப்படின்னா, whenever there is a missing data, throw it out. Because all these things comes only when we want to consider the missing data. So the easiest and the simplest solution which a researcher thinks but a wrong solution is throwing the missing data. Because this kind of a pattern may try to tell something to us. That is why we say data always wants to try to tell a story to us. Only thing is we should listen. Unless we talk in the same language of the data will never tell the story to us. But the story would be an interesting one. So the thing is, we have to sit, talk with the data and then find out the pattern. That is a very, very, very tremendous task. But still, when you have missing data, we need to do that too. Then sometimes you may not know the reason at all. I try to find out a pattern. Still I can't find out a pattern. Whatever variables, I'm just putting it inside everything, I'm breaking my head, everything. But still, I know that there is a pattern, but I couldn't come out with a reason for the pattern. That is where the real challenge lies. Then you have to give an explanation for it. There is a pattern, but you really don't know what sort of a pattern that really occurs. You don't know the reason behind the pattern. Nothing you could make it up. Then you have to come out, that is where the challenge of the researcher is. You have to come out with an explanation for it. So that is why the simplest shortcut way, usually we adopt. But don't do that. Sometimes if you are taking up the challenge, you may end up in having another kind of an exploration towards your title itself. You may have a pretty relook into your title, or else you may explore certain other different perspectives of your title. So the missing data will give an entirely different perspective for your title itself. Then the other thing is, we'll be just determining to what extent it is missing. So sometimes if it is very less, as I said, when you have lakhs and lakhs of data, if only 30 or 40 is missing, then it is very, very low. If it is very, very low, you can just ignore it and then you can move ahead. But if it is very high, then we look for the pattern. Here, how do we decide what is high and what is low? So usually, say for example, when you have 15% to the maximum extent of 15% of missing data, usually we consider it as an okay kind of a thing, especially when you are doing with non-human beings. That is, or else even with the human beings, if you are doing in a restricted setup, this 15% is applicable. If it is an open setup, say for example about your, as I said, உங்களோட IQ, அது மாதிரி நான் collect பண்றேன் அப்படின்னா, அந்த இடத்துலலாம் 40% missing is also okay. Because if I am doing it in a whole entire societal perspective, then in that case, even 40% of the data that is missing also we take into consideration. But majorly, to be on the safer side, usually we take 15% as a threshold value. Then look for the sufficiency. Whatever the data that you have got, is it sufficient enough for your research design? Say for example, if you are doing an experimental study, is there anyone who has got some idea of experimental study in your mind? ஏதாவது experiments பண்ணி பார்க்கலாம் அப்படிலாம் இருக்கா? Or something like, with your machines you can simulate and do something. Do you have ideas of doing something like that? Then it is all about your experimental study. If you are doing experiments with human beings, then the things are entirely different. You can't do an experiment with a hell lot of people. Usually our sample size would be very much restricted. Maybe you can do an experiment to the maximum with some 70 people. Beyond that 70, you can't have a control over people itself. Then in that case, even 15% is big number. Because your sample size itself is very small. Usually, if it is an experimental study, not anything more than 3 to 5% is allowed. If it is an open study where you have got observation or interview or any other data collection technique, again with the human being, you can extend up to 15%. If it is a big society, that is what your sample is all about, then you can extend to 40%. You can throw it and then you can move ahead. So these are all certain threshold values. So here the decision is whether to delete or not. So this is the question which we will be deciding. Say for example, as I said, this 30 people missing IQ. Can I really delete this 30 people from my research? Or else do I need to include them? Remember, deletion is not an action. Okay? First we checked for the type of missing data, and then we checked for the extent of the missing data. In that we check for randomness and everything. After that we are deleting. Remember, deleting is not an action which we are taking. Deletion is imperative in that particular place. After deletion, again you can go ahead in any other actions, right? So whether to decide if you have to delete it or not. Say for example, if the missing data is more than 50%, I am collecting data from this 120 people and I have got only from 50 people. So it means that 60 has not answered. Then it means that I have to stop my research at that point. There is no point at all. Because more than 50% has not answered. So it means that there is a complete flaw in my research design. I have to go rethink about my research design and then only I can come out with that. So if it is more than 50%, it means that my title is null and void at that moment. And my research design is also null and void at that moment. I have to think about other things and then I have to move ahead. Okay. So the thing is, what kind, okay, I'll just rush it up because I think it's almost time. Okay, I'll just put it in a shorter way. So the one thing is we have to decide whether we have to delete it or not. It is not that just like that we will be deleting. Prior to that, we'll be looking into many other things. Say for example, there is a position where you can't delete it. Because the 30% is more in number, we can't delete it. What are all the other things can I really do? So the one thing is, I can look for a case-by-case application. Say for example, from 120 students, from 120 participants, I am collecting data. My questionnaire has got 50 questions. I have to look into which question is missing for a major extent. Say for example, is it question number 7? Majority of the people have missed it. Or else is it question number 8? Majority of the people have missed it. So I have to think as a case-by-case approach. Or else I can have a variable approach. The thing is, say for example, IQ is not a one thing, right? IQ comprises of my verbal ability, logical thinking, reasoning, so many things. Then even I can think about the variable perspective. So either I can take a case perspective or else I can think a variable perspective. And if at all, if this case and the variable occurs randomly, that is the missing things occurs randomly, then what I can do is, there are so many remedies are there. One thing is, either I can fill it up with a mean or a median approach. Say for example, the entire class mean I have got right. So whatever is missing, I can fill it up with the mean. Or else, if at all, if the entire class has got a median, if it is a skewed data, then if the entire class has got a median, then I can replace it with my median. This is one way. For that, you have to check where the mean lies or else where the median lies. There are certain prerequisites. And another thing is, say for example, if there are similar questions. Say for example, in the verbal aptitude itself, the question number 6 and question number 7 are a little bit related. The question number 6 is missing and question number 7 you have answered. Then I can just replace it with question number 7, provided the questions are related questions. Or else the questions are bit indicative at least. Then in that case I can replace it with that. Otherwise, the one basic thing what we usually do is, we go for a maximum likelihood model. What is being done is, whatever the missing data is, the missing data will be just using a dummy variable inside it. So we will be just segregating the missing ones and the non-missing ones. Then we build up a model with the missing ones. Remember simple, say for example, this straight line equations. or a basic regression, y is equal to mx plus c. That is one basic model which we will be using here. So we'll be just making out a model with the missing one and then without the missing one. Then without the missing one model, the standard error would be generated. That error would be used for the missing ones. Then using that, we can go for an estimation. This is the one which we usually follow. That is, we call it as an EM model. So EM model is a statistical procedure where without any bias or else without any kind of a, you need not to doubt at all, without any doubt, you can replace the missing values. Because it is completely based on a statistical procedure. The missing ones will be just, that is, we'll be just entirely dividing your entire data set into missing ones and non-missing ones. Then we'll try to come out with a model for the missing ones and the non-missing ones. Then the standard error from the non-missing ones will be making use of in the missing model. Then using that as a basis, we try to make out an estimation. Simple, y is equal to mx plus c. This could be made out an estimation, right? For any x value, you can make out an estimate for y. No, is it not? Y is equal to mx plus c. For any x, you can forecast or else you can estimate y. The same technique we will be using for the missing values also. That is, we will be generating two different models. One model we will be using as a base. Then from the base, we generate the error. That error would be used in this model for the missing model. Then using that, we just make out an estimation. Then we substitute. This is one major thing which you all can make use of. For that, but the thing is, yes, there are statistical procedures which can help it out easily, but we make use of dummy variables. That is, you have to code it. The missing value you have to make out a different code, then for the real values you have to make out a different code. You'll be having two different codes. A dichotomous code you will be having. Then using that dichotomous codes as a basis, you'll be running something called as a logistic regression. It's not a simple regression we write because it's a dichotomous one. We'll be making use of something called the logit regression. Then using that logit regression as a basis, we try to make it up. So this is with the missing data. Then there is something called as an extreme values. Okay, say for example, I collect data from all these people and I want to make out a judgment about you all. There is one participant in the class, I'm making out for 120. There is one participant in this group who has taken 120 itself. Or IQ of this entire group. I just want to make out a generalization of the IQ of this class. There is one person who has scored 120 out of 120. And the next score itself is somewhere around 93 or 94. There is one person who has got 120. Now what to do with this 120 till? யாரோ ஒருத்தர் நம்ம கிளாஸ்ல நீங்க நான் எல்லாரும் தான் இருக்கோம், நான் இல்ல அது. உங்கள்ல இருந்து யாரோ ஒருத்தர் வந்து 120 தான் மேக்ஸிமம் ஸ்கோர், 120 வாங்கிட்டாங்க. அடுத்த ஸ்கோரே வந்து எங்கயோ 93ல தான் இருக்கு. இப்போ அந்த 120 என்ன பண்ணலாம் சொல்லுங்க? இந்த இடத்தை விட்டு ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வெளியில அனுப்பிடலாம். ஏன்னா அவரை நான் இங்க உள்ள இந்த கேம்ல நான் அவரை சேர்த்துக்கிட்டேன் அப்படின்னா அவர் completely is going to be a headache to the entire one, right? Because we have got an entirely different kind of a flow. That individual has got an entirely different kind of a flow. Then another thing, say for example, there is another individual at the other end who has scored only some 5 or 6. நமக்கு என்ன சொன்னாலுமே புரியல. You might have come across such a kind of person. என்ன சொன்னாலும் எப்படி சொன்னாலும் எந்த விதமா சொன்னாலும் எந்த மொழியில சொன்னாலும் என்ன சொன்னாலுமே அவங்க தலைக்குள்ளே ஏறாது. அந்த மாதிரி யாரோ ஒருத்தர் இருக்காங்க அப்படினா these we call it the extreme ones. That is which really alters the flow of the other rest of the data sets. We call that as extreme values. So in case if we have all these kind of an extreme values, what to do that? So these extreme values we call it as outliers. And remember again, for these outliers also you can't just like that throw them out. இப்போ நான் சொன்னல அந்த 120 வெளியில போபான்னு சொல்லிரலாம். பேசுறதுக்கு தான் இது கரெக்ட்டா இருக்கும், ரிசர்ச்சுக்கு கரெக்ட்டா இருக்காது. Because that 120 may give an entirely different perspective to my research. What I have not thought about, that 120 will tell. Because I feel that people are average in nature. People who come to research, they don't have any other good work to do. That is why they have come to research. Maybe I may have this kind of a thing in my head, but this 120 person, he clearly tells me on my face, all your judgment about these research scholars is wrong. That is what he clearly tells to me, right? இந்த மாதிரி நான் ஒரு தப்பான மைண்ட் செட்ல நான் என்னோட ரிசர்ச்சை ஸ்டார்ட் பண்றேன்னா that 120 tells on my face, you are wrong. think in a different perspective. We are also there, accommodate us. Or else if I say that, okay, people who do research are pretty good in their IQ levels. There is someone who has got some 5 marks or 6 marks. Then again, that person also says, I am also in the race. நானும் இருக்கிறேன் இந்த ரேஸ்ல நானும் இருக்கிறேன் என்னையும் விட்டுறாத என்னையும் இழுத்துட்டே போ அதையும் அவங்க சொல்றாங்க. So this kind of an extreme values, it is not that you can really throw out your extreme values unless and until they are completely ignorable, because my research is not something of that sort. Then you have to accommodate it, because that will give an entirely different perspective. From there only we try to come out with the entirely new findings. So these extreme values are really good. We have to profile it separately. We have to accommodate them in the research. They will give an entirely different kind of insights. So extreme values are not to be thrown. Missing values are not to be thrown. Again, extreme values are also not to be thrown. They will give an entirely different perspective. Then there is another thing where you have to look into the distribution of your data. Unless and until your data is normally distributed, whatever techniques you have in your mind, you can never apply. Okay, now there is one question to you. Say for example, I have numbers like 1, 100, 1000, 2000, 3000, then 103, then some 10,000. This kind of numbers I have. It is completely scattered, right? If I am plotting it in the graph, I can't plot it out first of all. Even if I try to plot it in a graph, it's completely scattered. Now what should I do with this data? நீங்களுமே ரிசர்ச் பண்ணும்போது இதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப குவைட் காமன். அன்எக்ஸ்பெக்டடாக டேட்டா வந்து நிற்கும், கம்ப்ளீட்லி ஸ்கேட்டர்ட். வாட் வுட் யூ டூ? யூ எக்ஸ்பெக்ட் ஆல் டேட்டா டு ஃபால் பிட்வீன் 100 to 300, பட் யூ எண்ட் அப் இன் ஹேவிங் திஸ் கைண்ட் ஆஃப் அ டேட்டா செட். நீங்கள் ஏதோ ஒரு மிஷினை சிமுலேட் பண்ணுறீங்க, எல்லாம் 100 to 300 தான் வரணும் நம்ம நினைக்கிறோம். பட் தி திங் இஸ் யுவர் மிஷின் இஸ் த்ரோயிங் சச் அ கைண்ட் ஆஃப் அ டேட்டா, some 1, some 100, some 10,000, again 1,000, 3,000, 200, 400, 500. What to do with this data? ஓட முடியாதுல்ல. I don't want research ன்னு சொல்லிட்டு ஓட முடியாதுல்ல. இப்போ இதையும் ஏதாவது பண்ணி தானே ஆகணும். என்ன பண்ணுவீங்க? Because the data is too scattered. The distance between all these numbers are so big that you can't even visualize in a graph. ஒரு 2D கிராஃபுக்குள்ள எல்லாத்தையும் கொண்டு வந்து விஷுவலைஸ் கூட பண்ண முடியாது. ஏன்னா அங்கே ஒரு 10,000லாம் இருக்குது, இங்கே இந்த கார்னரில் ஒரு 1 இருக்குது. நான் என்ன பண்ணுவேன்? What we can really do? So only thing is, remember again, you can't run away, right? So only what we are left out with, the thing is, the distance between all these numbers are very big. Now only hope what I have is, how can I reduce the distances? Always remember, whenever you transform your numbers, the number will never lose its characteristic. Say for example, you have got a data set from 100 to 200, you make out a mean. All these numbers you are squaring, and then the mean. Again, if you are using this mean in your research, your results will never alter. Or else if you are making out a square root, still you have got a data, right? Ella numbers now. The numbers are அப்படியே நீங்க யூஸ் பண்ணாலும் the number has got a characteristic. Even if you are squaring the numbers, the characteristic won't be lost. Only thing is you are squaring, or else you are shifting anything, any kind of a transformation, the characteristic of the number will never be lost. Now you just tell me this number, how will you reduce the spaces?
Take the log.
Good. The simplest way is take the log. Now just look into log of 1, log of 100, log of 10, log of 10,000. So the distance between 100 and 1,000 is being reduced to 1 unit. 100 எங்க இருக்கு, 1000 எங்க இருக்கு. Now if you take log of every number, that is being completely reduced to 1 unit. Now you can easily visualize in a graph, right? எங்க போனாலுமே தரன்னு இழுத்துட்டு வந்து அந்த இடத்துல உட்கார வச்சிடலாம் log எடுத்துட்டா. And do remember, even if you are taking any kind of a transformation, the characteristic of the number is not lost. Again, after that log, if you are taking up log, then for your further analysis, the log of that number you would be using for further analysis. But your results will be intact. Your results will never change. So if your data set is too scattered, you can think about transformation. Or else even if your data set is too congested. Say for example, you collect data. You expect the data to fall between 1 to 100. Sadly, it is between 20 to 40, everything has fallen. இப்போ என்ன பண்ணணும்? அங்கே ஓடி போனது எல்லாத்தையும் இழுத்துட்டு வர மாதிரி இங்கே பக்கத்தில் உட்காந்துக்கிறத அடித்து துரத்தணும். You have to make out a distance more. So now you can take out your square, you can square the number, you can rise to any nth power. Even if you are raising all your numbers to nth power, the characteristic won't be lost. So think of the distribution. Unless and until it is normally distributed, you can't use for any other analysis. So if it is scattered, yes, you can do the transformation and then you can make it out to be normally distributed. Or else, if it is completely congested, you can disperse the data and then you can make it to be normally distributed. But remember, unless and until it is normally distributed, you can't make use of many statistical techniques. But there are certain specific statistical techniques that are available for the skewed data set. நம்ம எல்லாமே பண்ணுறோம், லாக் எடுக்கிறோம், அதை எடுக்கிறோம், இதை எடுக்கிறோம், என்ன பண்ணாலுமே நார்மலி டிஸ்ட்ரிபியூட்டடாக வராமல் அப்படியே நிற்கும் டேட்டா. இப்போ உங்களுக்கு தெரியாது, டேட்டா கையில் வந்தோடனே உங்களுக்கு பண்ணி பார்த்தா தெரியும், என்ன செஞ்சாலுமே டேட்டா நீங்கள் சொல்கிறத கேட்கவே கேட்காது, அது தேமேன்னு இருக்கும். So that is the biggest challenge which you would be facing. Even if you do any kind of a transformation, you may take log to the base 2, log to the base 10 or any antilog, anything, whatever that transformation you have, whatever that is available under the sky, you have tried it up. But at the end, the data is there as it is as a skewed one. It is completely pushed to one side. So you can't make use of many statistical techniques, but still there are certain, we call it as a non-parametric techniques. There are, for every statistical technique, whatever you have, for a normally distributed data, there are parallel non-parametric techniques available. Do remember that. இப்படி எங்கேயோ போயிருச்சு அப்படின்னா அது எண்டு கிடையாது, நமக்காக சில statistical techniques are available. But the problem is, if you are using non-parametric tests, it's much more error. நீங்கள் பப்ளிஷ் பண்ணுற எந்த இடத்துலையுமே அதை எடுத்துக்க மாட்டாங்க. Because it is completely hell lot of error goes inside. So we can't make out a generalization or else inferences or insights. That's the questionable insights which we would be generating. So majorly check for your distribution.
Because I understand that statistical analysis, data analysis is a huge area where most of us require a lot of hand-holding. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, I would say. So the Center for Research has also planned an exclusive program on the statistical analysis that is required for different disciplines. But what Madam had did today was really, it was worthwhile, and the kind of topics she touched, the way she interweaved it into the program, the narrative that unfolded out of the way she characterized those numbers, metric and non-metric data. I think these are certain starting points for you to think about. So please do that. Thank you for accepting our invitation and making it a very lively session. I think there was a lot to learn from this particular session. We will keep the momentum and take it ahead. I understand that we are breaking a little late for lunch. What we will do is we will come back at 2 and start the next session. So Shanmugam sir will be coming, and we will be having another session called Identifying a Non-Plagiaristic Research Gap. Thank you, Dr. Thiruchelvi.